I'm really excited to be here today and talk about serendipity because I feel like this is something that is right up my alley. It seems to me that when you talk about serendipity, people generally fall into one of two categories. There are those that see good luck as random or meaningless, and then there are those that say to themselves, wait a minute, what just happened here? What is the meaning of this sign? And to give you an idea of which group I fall into, I'd like to start with the first piece of art my wife, Sarah, gave me. This poster is from the popular show X-Files. Fox Mulder had it in his office. They were FBI agents investigating conspiracy theories. And it's a good indicator of my mindset, as well as a testament to how much my wife loves me that we have this hung up in our house. But I love the message of this poster. I think of it as a willingness to see good luck or fortuitous happenstance as something, as opposed to nothing. In other words, choose to find the potential in what could be considered just good luck. To be clear, I don't think you can manufacture good luck, but I do think you can position yourself to experience serendipity more often by becoming a serendipitous learner. As an educator of nearly 20 years, I can tell you with certainty that there are many different types of learning styles. But what I like most about being a serendipitous learner is the thrill of discovery. So to prepare for this talk, I wanted to focus on 3 habits or patterns of behavior that have led me to moments of serendipity and that might be of some value to you. Let me first point out that they all have one thing in common, and namely, they all involve myself being an active participant. Because serendipity doesn't happen or occur as much when you sit idly by. So you have to put yourself out there. You have to engage. In other words, once you get yourself out there, it becomes a more fluid approach to becoming a serendipitous learner. So the first habit is pursue chance. And since chance can mean anything to all of us, and we all have a different idea about this, I wanted you to think about it in the simplest terms. And think about it as just allowing a sense of play into your life and keeping an open mind. We were all children at one time, and some of us, myself included, still go back and gravitate towards this idea of make-believe and world building. And when I was preparing for this talk, I had a good time looking back through these photo albums of pictures of myself playing when I was younger. And here is one. By engaging in play, I was in pursuit of the potential that these blocks had for becoming a fortress for my army men. Here's another one I found. That's me playing the tennis racket. To give you a little background on this photograph, this was an air band I was in middle school, right around the time that Back to the Future came out. So I think we were playing Johnny Be Good, and I don't know how the clarinet came into play in that song, but as children, we naturally have this tendency to pursue chance and to find the potential in whatever is around us or our surroundings. And this is a great mindset. Because pursuing the chance that you might find the potential in something makes it easier to find the potential in everything. Sarah and I have 2 little girls, Edie and Thea, 6 and 3 years old. And they already see my potential as a vehicle, which is known in our house as the bath bus, where I get on my hands and knees and I deliver them from their beds down the hallway to the bathtub. But to pursue chance and find the potential is easy when it's an encounter that's immediately beneficial, like finding a $20 bill on the street. Everybody finds value in that. You're going to apply it to something that you want. It's a no-brainer. The flip side to this coin is to try and find the potential or value in situations where you might feel you made a mistake or it's sort of a negative encounter, which brings me to number 2, find the value in mistakes. In the realm of academia, we refer to this as wabi-sabi. I've been teaching for almost 20 years. Next year will be my 12th year with JCPS. And I can tell you that this philosophy has been my greatest asset. We like to refer to it as just happy accidents, especially when you're working with young students that are building their self-esteem and they're just unsure of themselves. You have to help them find the silver lining, and it behooves everybody involved if everybody can walk out with a good frame of mind. And the most important thing for me as a teacher is to know that when my students leave, they're leaving as a creative problem solver, because a lot of them won't go on to pursue art, but to know how to work a problem and find a solution is going to benefit them no matter what area they go into. So, in thinking about this talk, I reflected on a whole body of work that came out of a moment of wabi-sabi. But before I talk about that, I need to show you some examples of my work so you can have an understanding to the sorts of things that I do in the studio. If I was to describe my work, I would use words like controlled, colorful, maybe slightly obsessive. So let's travel back to the year 2009. I had this enormous studio space, which is now where Impellizzeri's is, downtown across from the Yum Center. It helps when you have a generous brother-in-law who owns that space. But it was about 10,000 square feet, and those of you that create and work in a studio environment, you know that the size of your space sometimes dictates the size of the work you make. And so I was in this large space and I started working on this piece called the LHC and the Search for the Higgs Boson. Here's a picture of it from IUS from a show a couple of years ago. The LHC is a Large Hadron Collider in Geneva where they were slamming particles together to look for this elusive element that was theoretical. A lot of people called it the God particle. And I apologize to any physicists in the room for that explanation, but that you get the general idea. Some people were worried it would create a black hole or something, but I found it really inspirational. What they were doing underground, it was going to change the world forever. And I love this picture because I feel like this girl is really, she gets it. She's right there. So I was working on this piece in the studio space, and I thought, oh, this is huge, I love it, I got to work on something even bigger. So I prepped 3 more panels that, when put together, they would be 8 by 12 feet. And I thought, oh, I'm going to do another painting. And for some reason, I primed them, I primed them, and then I prepped them in black enamel. And I can't really remember what I was thinking about doing that. But I did that. I went back, I was working on the LHC. Had these panels in my peripheral vision, and I remember one day looking at them and thinking, that was a huge mistake. I don't know why I did that. That's gonna take so many coats of paint to paint over these and make them look like the color can come through. And I felt like kicking myself, but I knew that there was nothing that I just had to get to work and sand them back down to a surface that I could work on. So I just threw on my headphones, and to add insult to injury, this was before I had an electric sander, so I was doing it all by hand. So I prepped them up on the wall, and I just wasn't even thinking, and I come over to the, we'll say this is like 8 by 12 feet. And I was just sanding it like this and getting into it and just thinking, why did I do this? This is going to take forever. I'm losing 2 to 3 days. And I go back, I walk away. Remember, it's 10,000 square feet. And out of my peripheral vision, I start to see these marks that came through. And I was thinking, well, that's interesting. That is not how I work. I don't know who just did that. I don't see the color or the obsessiveness or the control. But there was something else that was there. There was an expressive motion to the marks, and it was refreshing. And I think it was refreshing because it was something that I was not used to seeing coming out of my studio. And I started to look at these marks as a sort of response to the LHC. And I had a moment of serendipity. And so I thought, well, I have nothing to lose. I was planning on sanding this whole surface down anyways. I might as well play, keep an open mind, and let's just see what happens. So I went with these marks, and I finished it out. I worked the whole 8 by 12 surface, and it was pleasantly surprising. This is a picture of the finished piece, and to give you an idea of the detail I just showed you, the detail is right here. Sorry, my voice keeps going really loud and then really soft there. But this turned into an exhibit with a full body of work that spanned 2 buildings. The show started in the Green Building Gallery with the LHC, and I had set up a little studio space with just the one piece. And I also keep all my tape. I do use tape. I keep all my tape because I feel bad throwing all that away. So right now in my studio, I have a tape ball that's rather large. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I'm looking for the potential in that. So the show started out in the Green Building Gallery. You came here, you saw the LHC, the catalyst for the show, and then you would travel out of the Green Building across the parking lot to the space that is now Scout Gallery. And it was really raw. There was water dripping out of the ceiling, and Sarah and I put up some track lighting, and we got it ready, and we installed all the work, and it just fit. It just worked. And I couldn't have been more happy with the exhibit. And so there was an element of play involved with this discovery, and when I discovered this potential, it truly was a happy accident. I mean, I didn't have much to lose, but nobody got hurt. I ended up with a body of work that I was really happy with, and it turned out to be a great thing. Now, personally, I have found it harder to find the value in mistakes that leave me feeling embarrassed or humiliated or just generally disappointed in myself. And it just so happens I have one of those examples to share as well. So now let's go back to 2015, the summer of 2015. I was contacted by an individual to work on a large mural project, a project that had a deadline. It was about 5 weeks. And to give you an idea of how long my work takes, a painting sometimes takes anywhere from a month to 3 months, 6 months. So now we're talking about working on a multiple-story mural and completing that in 5 weeks. And side note, I've never done a mural before in my life. So my response, absolutely. And I went right to work sketching out ideas and brainstorming with my wife, Sarah. There's another one. And the magnitude of this project started to weigh on me, and it started slowly. And I started to have a little bit of worry. I started to get concerned that this was not going to be something that I could complete, that I could fulfill. And I was worried about letting this individual down who had been a huge supporter of mine in the past. So there was a range of emotions that I was going through. And to give you an idea of those emotions, I've selected some self-portrait illustrations from a different project. So my first emotion was excitement. Working on a mural, working big, I was thrilled at the potential of doing this. But soon after that, it turned into anxiety, and I was thinking, this is not good, what have I agreed to do here? And keep in mind, this is in a 24-hour period that I was going through all these emotions. And then finally, emotionally, I felt like I hit a brick wall and I ended up just down in the dumps, a full-on panic attack. And after speaking with Sarah, she reminded me that if I was unable to do it, I needed to let him know so that he could find someone else to do this project. There was a timeline involved, and I needed to let him know. I agreed. I said, you're right, I got to call him. I got to call him and tell him I can't do this. So I did, and I was so embarrassed. I was completely embarrassed because I like to feel like I can rise to a challenge, especially a creative challenge where my work is challenging, and that's part of why I enjoy it so much. It's because it allows me to surprise myself. But he was gracious, and he understood, and he ended up finding another very talented artist, and he did an amazing job. And it looks great, and I was really happy to see that that was the outcome because it took some of the pressure off me. But it didn't really help with how I was feeling in this cloud of embarrassment and disappointment. But out of this, there was a small idea, and I really had no choice but to focus on that small idea because it was the one positive thing out of that experience that was going to lead me to a happy place. And so it started out as something very small, and I kind of nurtured it, and I put all my energy into it, and I focused on this, trying not to think about how I had let somebody down, and it gradually got bigger. And I kept putting all my energy into it to where I realized that the value of my having made this mistake was that now I realized that I really desperately wanted to work on a mural. I'd never worked on something that large, and I love working on large work, so it just seemed to sink. So now I had to make some sort of passage to making this happen. It was a desire worth pursuing. So maybe the next day I was speaking with a muralist friend of mine, and she said, oh, you want to do a mural? Okay. Well, I just happen to know of a guy who's looking for artists to design and execute original murals, and they're going to pay you to do this if it works out. And I thought, yes, that's what I'm looking for. And that person was Ben Terry. And so I reached out to Ben, and we met, and we had a lot of good conversations, and we just synced. He told me about the revitalization project that Access Ventures was working on with the Shelby Park area, and how there was a community idea behind what they were doing. And I loved that idea. Being a teacher, you know how important community is. And I thought, wow, this is a win-win. This is gonna benefit other people, it's gonna benefit me, and there's no deadline. Yes, I would love to do this. They came and visited the studio, they checked out my work, they liked what I was doing, I liked what they were doing, and we just agreed to it. And it turned into a project that it still has an impact on me today, just when I think about it, it just fills me up. And they made a short film about the project, which is right here.
Thriving communities are intrinsically complex and diverse, whether economically, racially, or in educational attainment. The problems that communities face are therefore equally complex. At Access Ventures, we seek to invest into this complexity and diversity by deploying holistic strategies. One of these investments is into the creative arts.
The creative arts are often considered to be at the outskirts of community development process and only a minor player in regenerating neighborhoods. So we believe at Access that the cultivation of smart, skilled, and conceptually rich and beautiful art is essential for the health and development of individuals and communities. So for this third project, it was important in our mind to find an artist who not only designs but also executes the project, and to challenge the idea of can a place where you create art and then also where the art is viewed be inspiring and challenging for an artist that would have impact not only within the neighborhood but in the artist himself. And so we came alongside Gibbs to be able to accomplish this.
To work on something that has a real-time effect on people this is their day-to-day life, that was something I was really interested in being a part of. I've never done a project like this before. I'm coming from working in a studio and working on work in isolation to working in public on something large-scale that can be seen all around, real-time, with people driving behind me, giving me thumbs up or honking and being nice and complimentary.
A mural is impactful into a neighborhood, not only because it beautifies the neighborhood, but it also adds to the story of the neighborhood.
One interaction stood out where a mother pulled over. She had her 2 daughters in the car, and she was complimenting me on the piece and that she loved how colorful it was, and that she felt that the neighborhood desperately needed something like this, something to look forward to, something that literally brightened up the neighborhood. And she went on to explain that it was her son that was shot and killed maybe a week before I started working down here. And it was a very emotional conversation, and art affects everybody in a different way. And I never would have imagined it touching somebody that has gone through such a great loss like that, a loss that many people can't even imagine. And I wasn't anticipating those kinds of interactions, and it's hard to put that into words.
Our thought was, how do we provide the resources and the support needed to help an artist like Gibbs flourish. And I think the result is it impacts the neighborhood and it impacts him personally. And that's really hard to not want to do.
There's no way I would regret this. This was a life changer. This made me a better person.
I think it's awesome. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. One, two, three.
So that turned into a monumental, life-changing experience. And like I said, I do like challenges. You saw I painted that all with that little brush. I've never used spray paint. Maybe I'll learn to use spray paint for the next project. But I became immersed into that community, and I got to know the residents, and I was down there for almost 3 months. And it just really, it changed my way of thinking about a lot of things, about public art, about how art affects individuals, and it was just a great thing to see that it not only changed me, but it changed the community as well. The last habit I'd like to talk about has the most potential for chance encounters and thrilling discoveries. And that is to look for the rabbit hole. This image is from Alice in Wonderland. She's chasing the rabbit down the hole, and it leads her to Wonderland. And there are many ways to find a rabbit hole. And what I've learned about rabbit holes is that they come in all shapes and sizes. And you never really know what will serve as a rabbit hole. But if you keep an open mind and you're willing to pursue chance, anything can become a rabbit hole. Side note, I love to read. I really love to read. I read fiction, nonfiction, whatever. My family, we make trips up to our library branch 2 or 3 times a week. We have a bag that hangs in our front hall that is the library bag. And I've started a routine where when we walk into the library, my girls will shoot off for the kids section where there's a castle and toys, and they'll look at books in there. And I'll walk down the aisles and I'll randomly grab books. And it could be the title of the book that jumps out at me. It could be the design of the spine. It could be something somebody wrote about the book on the back. But I'm grabbing multiple books because I'm looking for a chance for one of these to jump out at me. And so it becomes a heavy bag. We walk home, and since it's the library, I don't feel like I feel that it's okay to read 20 pages. If it clicks, it clicks. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I go through a lot of books this way. But this has turned into my grown-up type of play. I'm keeping an open mind, and when things click and I make a discovery, there's an entertainment value, or I'm learning about a specific subject, there's a payoff. But it wasn't until this last year that this habit, this exercise of serendipitous learning helped me get through a period of grief when my stepfather died. A few years ago, we noticed a cognitive decline in him, and about a year ago, he was diagnosed with Lewy body, dementia, and Alzheimer's. And after that, it was a real quick, steady decline to when he did pass. It was a blessing, and we all recognized that it was time. And I had encountered death before, but never with someone whom I had such a personal relationship with. And this staggered me. I didn't really know how to process this. To have someone that's part of your life for 30 years and then for them not to be there it's hard to see how that's possible. They're like a pillar that holds up your reality, and then that's gone. And so you have to figure out what that new reality is. Now, my background is I have a Christian background, and I'd read a number of books about Christian faith. Even my stepfather had recommended Lee Strobel's books, which I don't know if you're familiar with them, Case for Christ, Case for Faith, and they're interesting reads. But I've never been one for dogma, and I've always tried to welcome multiple perspectives. So I didn't really have something to fall back on, and I spoke with friends, I spoke with loved ones, and I realized that I didn't even know where to begin. I didn't know how to kind of get out of this crisis I was going through. And then the rabbit hole presented itself, and it was in the shape of a luminous crimson doorway. Now, remember how I said that rabbit holes come in all shapes and sizes, okay? So just bear with me as I lead you through this. So one night, Sarah and I sat down to watch this original show on Netflix called The OA, which if you've seen this show before, it deals with near-death experiences, which I had a general idea about. I knew there was a tunnel, you're surrounded by loved ones, there's a light at the end, and then there's someone saying, "It's not your time," and then you go back. But it was strange that we were watching the show, which we had no idea what it was about, and I was going through this turmoil personally. And in this show, it touched upon the idea of consciousness, and what is it, and where does it go? And this just happened to be the same questions that I was wrestling with. So I pulled out my phone and I got on the library's website and I plugged in near-death experiences. And the first book that came up was Life After Life by Raymond Moody, which I became a walking advertisement for after I read this book. And it was, all it was he was gathering firsthand accounts of near-death experiences from a range of faiths. And I appreciated the scientific background that he gave to this really serious subject. But there were a couple of things that I took from this book that really pushed me further down this rabbit hole. The first one was that what we learn about death may make an important difference in the way we live our lives. And I wanted to live a good life, and I wanted to learn about death and what that means and what's going on. The other thing I took from the book was that the physical brain does not create consciousness, that consciousness is internal. Now, I know this is getting kind of heavy. But this was really speaking to my art self, and this was helping me. I realized that this process of reading was really, it was helping me get through this period. So now my focus had sharpened around this idea of consciousness, and my investigation picked up speed. And there were a few books that were cited in this book that I thought, okay, all right, well, I've read Life After Life. Let me read these other books he mentions on there. Those books were Life After Death, Heaven and Hell, The Doors of Perception, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which honestly, I couldn't finish that book. It was very, very heavy. I ended up skimming a lot of that. But the rest of the books touched upon this idea of consciousness and something that we all share, and they all kind of gravitated around this idea of community, because this is something that we all go through. And that really touched me. That made a mark on me. At the same time, I was working on a series of paintings that I had started about 2 years ago, and it just so happened that they were coinciding when I was going through all this stuff with my family and my stepfather. And these paintings were called Transitions, and they dealt with this idea of a constant state of change that we're always living in, and the impact this has on our conscious experience. So here I was reading all these things about consciousness. I was working out some of these ideas in my studio, and it pulled me out of this existential kind of crisis, for lack of a better word. These are some examples of those paintings. They were much different than work I was previously working on. They were softer, and the color wasn't as vibrant, but they had a luminosity to them, and it just, they were in sync with all these things I was reading. Here's another one. There's one more. So where did it all lead? I didn't have any conclusive answers, so I hope that you weren't waiting for me to say something to that. But what I can say with certainty is that through the act of following all these leads and chance encounters that are part of the serendipitous learning experience, I emerged with a sense of peace and calm. And I didn't anticipate that would be the end result of everything that I was going through in my research. But I eventually felt like, okay, I've read enough, I've worked it out in the studio, and I'm in a good place. I feel good about where my stepfather is. I feel good about where I will one day be, and it healed me. And I think this was a result of my conscious choice to believe in something rather than nothing. So I hope when you leave this morning, you'll engage the world looking for potential so that you'll have more opportunity to experience serendipity in your life. Thank you.